UN Security Council envoys have traveled to the Rafah border region with Gaza. They were briefed on the humanitarian situation by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees before heading to the Rafah crossing. The UN says hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza are starving and aid isn't enough.
The main reason I will be going to Gaza is to tell my staff that the UNRWA intention is to stay and to find a way to scale up our operation. You know that a few days ago I have sent a letter to the President of the General Assembly and I have warned about the risk that the UNRWA might not be able to continue to operate because of the civil order breakdown. We hear for the first time that hunger is prevailing in Gaza. More and more people haven't eaten for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The last time I went was 2 weeks ago when I visited the vocational training center of Khan Yunis, hosting more than 35,000 people. I could see already firsthand the level of despair, the level of dispossession. People lack absolutely everything.
Well, that trip comes as the aid situation in Gaza continues to get worse. Palestinians who have not eaten for days have been looting aid distribution centers and scrambling to secure supplies for themselves and their families. Only a small number of aid trucks are crossing into Rafah from Egypt each day. Juliette Touma is the Global Communications Director for the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. She joins us now from Amman. Thanks very much for your time, Juliette. So what's been the assessment then of the team that just went through there?
Well, our Commissioner General is currently on the ground. He is in Gaza. This is the third trip that he makes since the war began. And the purpose is to go, first of all, to be with our teams who have been doing heroic work in providing life-saving support to people under exceptional circumstances. But also it's a message of support to the people of Gaza who have been going through a very, very brutal war.
And what is your colleague's assessment of the overall humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip?
Going from very, very bad to worse, going from a humanitarian crisis that evolved very early on in this war to a humanitarian catastrophe and a humanitarian operation that is being severely challenged, hence the letter that our commissioner wrote to the General Assembly, and mass movement of people, an exodus of people who continue to be shoved into what is just over a quarter of the Gaza Strip. And no place is safe, as we've been saying since early on in this war, and people have nowhere to go.
Are you getting any sense at all that your voices are being heard in all of this?
The General Assembly has called for a meeting later in the week. What we've been calling for since early on, and quite often our calls have gone unheeded, is for a humanitarian ceasefire. We saw that the pause was very welcome. It allowed us to bring in much needed supplies, and more importantly, it brought some respite and calm to the people in Gaza after 50 days of a very, very heavy siege and also brutal bombardment and loss of life and grief and despair. And we haven't seen any light, if you wish, since then. In fact, what happened is the absolute opposite. Another evacuation order from the Israeli authorities and an intensification in the military operation and more loss of lives.
What do you fear for the people of Gaza the longer this goes on? It's been mentioned that there is a very real fear. You know, we talked there about hunger and people raiding distribution centers. Is there a very real fear that more of that could happen, and that there could be more widespread hunger and starvation and even the spread of disease there?
Gaza is fast becoming unlivable. It's becoming a place not for humans. Diseases are indeed spreading, including in our facilities, where, by the way, we're hosting 9 times more than what we had planned for. So 1.3 million people are now in overcrowded UNRWA shelters that are themselves unprotected. People don't have enough food, and yes, they are getting hungry. Many of them are getting very understandably frustrated. We have seen break-ins into our warehouses, and then some of our aid trucks, they've been stopped, and people literally started taking food from those trucks and eating food then and there. So it's a desperate situation, and that shows that if the war continues, Gaza is going to sink further into the abyss.
We mentioned earlier that there is a flow of aid going into Gaza from Rafah, from Egypt, but it's just a trickle at the moment. It's not nearly enough. Just from a practical sense, what is it that is stopping more aid getting in through that point from Egypt? Is there more that that Egypt could be doing to get more trucks in there?
The aid that has been allowed in is not at all enough. And it's also, Rafah is not a place, not a crossing point that is equipped to receive a massive number of trucks. This is precisely why we've been calling on the Israeli authorities to open the other crossing that we've been using before the war. This is Kerem Shalom, and to use that for the trucks. You see, before the war, that crossing was able to process 500 trucks, both for humanitarian use and also for commercial use. And right now, there are no markets in Gaza. I mean, when I was there just a couple of weeks ago, every single shop that we drove past was closed. Every pharmacy was closed, apart from a few vegetable stalls here and there and a couple of bakeries open with very long lines. There's nothing. There's no market. So what needs to happen is more openings, including those crossings that Israel controls, so that there's a more regular flow of humanitarian supplies and also of commercial goods.
Good to talk to you, Juliette Touma. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.